Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Hicks, Executive Editor of the Massachusetts Review. Welcome and thanks for coming to our long-awaited 2020 Anne Halley Prize-winning reading with Samuel Taylor. And, after another day of separation and isolation, and yet another day of brutal news about the dark times we face, we really need events like this more than ever, moments where we come together and celebrate the love we all share. As Bertolt Brecht long ago told us, even in times like these, there will be singing. There must be. And spring is coming. Here in Western Massachusetts, we're sure of that since the one sure sign of spring just arrived, our spring issue. Earlier this week. And my job's really simple tonight. I'm just here to welcome everybody, and then Ellen Duray Watson, our poetry editor, will tell you a bit about Anne Halley, since our prize is named for her. And then Ellen will introduce our prize-winning poet. So that's pretty much it. I just also want to thank our sponsors, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Dreyfus Foundation, the Five College Consortium, and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, as well as a host of private donors, subscribers, and contributors. Particularly during this plague year, we're incredibly grateful to you all for having stepped up and helped us in these difficult times. So thanks. To you, Ellen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy finally to be looking at Sam Taylor. We've waited a year, but it's wonderful to have this happening. As is our custom, I will begin the reading by reading a poem by Anne Halley, poet, teacher, longtime MR poetry editor, whose friends and colleagues at UMass underwrite this annual prize in her memory and her honor. The prize celebrates one poem from the year's 4 issues of the magazine and is judged by the poetry editors, myself and Deb Gorlin, along with a third judge, usually a local scholar or poet, often from the UMass English department or MFA program. I'm going to read from this book with a beautiful Leonard Baskin cover, The Bearded Mother, a little poem that is called Sight's Not the Way. That's S-I-G-H-T'-S, Sight's Not the Way. Sight's not the way, except we are all eyes, to force the image on the lidless skin. See with and in the flesh, that seeing last as deep as blood, as darkly quickening. See hard, untangled in the wavery light, steadier than the green eye's tidal fall. No image, but forced passage, sensualized in the full sight that makes invisible. Last year, Lee Edwards, UMass Professor Emerita and Dean, joined Deborah Gorlin and I to reread the year's worth of poetry. And we unanimously chose Sam Taylor's Postcards from Babel as 2020's winning poem. Last year, this time, many of us had not even heard of Zoom, but here we are. And I'm glad for it, that we can at least go on. Sam Taylor teaches and directs the MFA program at Wichita State University, tends a wild garden, and has written 3 books of poems. The Book of Fools, an essay and memoir and verse, forthcoming from Negative Capability Press. Body of the World from a Sable Copper Canyon, and Nude Descending an Empire from the wonderful Pitt series. He's currently at work on another collection in which the winning poem will appear. Sam's work has been recognized with numerous other awards, including the Amy Lowell Poetry Traveling Scholarship and a boatload of residency fellowships. A native of Miami, Sam seems to have lived all over the place, including 3 years as the caretaker of a remote wilderness refuge that was snowed in during the winter without phone, electricity, or internet. From this, I surmise he is blessed with quite reliable inner resources, which are evident in the poems as well. Ambitious, tender, and expertly woven, They explore themes of history, mysticism, social justice, sexuality, and ecological urgency. A deeply engaged citizen poet, Sam was praised by Ilya Kaminsky as, quote, a poet to reckon with, a poet to live with, a poet to marvel at. I hate to do this, but I just can't stop myself. Let me give you the first 3 lines of the winning poem, Postcards from Babel, as both a tease and a demonstration of how quickly and fully the poem draws us in. Is it a coincidence that Warsaw saw the worst of the war? Or that all the shrapnel of the heart lies scattered in the earth? Mostly, the world is not happening in our language. Who could possibly stop there, except just to marvel for a moment and then plunge on ahead, to find phrases like the horizon of what I was saying? We found this poem to be immediately available, complex in thought and structure, full of the world, its simultaneity, and bursting with what we know, what we forget, and what we never knew. It also turns out to be, in my mind, at least, emblematic of Sam's work. Mind, heart, bodily and spiritual impulse, love and hurt and anecdote, all are given generous space in this work, which also leaves room for frogs, misplaced magazines, stars, blacksmiths, and corn lilies, the stuff that engages all of our senses and gives these poems their texture and nearness, before they turn and swerve once more into outsized ideas and deep human quandary. I come back and back to these poems for all these reasons, and for instruction in the power of syntax and line endings. One example, before I mute myself and let the poetry come, the first 2.5 lines of the poem Accident. A beacon moving through the darkest crime scene, line break, my friend said when I told him I didn't know, line break, what love was. Please join me in welcoming heartily Sam Taylor.
Thank you, Ellen. That was a really beautiful and generous introduction. I want to thank the Massachusetts Review and particularly Ellen and Deb for selecting the poem, and also Emily for all she does as managing editor. She's helped me with a lot of things, and I want to thank all of those who are out there listening. This feels so strange to me to just be in my house reading and not see who is out there or be able to feel you, which is what I normally do in a reading. And I haven't really attended any online anythings this year. So 1, you are all very kind to be here. And 2, practically my only reference for this is like AOC going live on Instagram and making macaroni and cheese. So I feel like I should be sharing my pesto or shrimp scampi recipe or something like that. But I'm no AOC, obviously. And I don't always drink a lot when I read, but I figured I could use both the intoxicant and the prop tonight. So you're welcome to join me and drink a glass of wine or 2 or whatever you are drinking for St. Patty's Day. At least it's a green bottle. And I think the rule with this, I think the way it works is that if you like a poem, you drink, and if you don't like a poem, you also drink. So you really can't lose. I'm going to read a few new poems and then a couple poems from my second book, New Descending in Empire. And I will begin by reading the poem that won the Anne Halley Prize. So Ellen just said she was going to tease you with those lines, but you won't have to wait very long. It was done in this beautiful broadside that I thought I'd share another another prop. Postcards from Babel. I should say there's a bit of Polish in here, and I'm sure I'll mispronounce it because I don't speak Polish. Postcards from Babel. Is it coincidence that Warsaw saw the worst of the war? Or that all the shrapnel of the word heart lies scattered in the earth? Mostly the world is not happening in our language. Beside a fountain in a hillside park in Catania, Sicily, a boy and girl face each other in a dialect of the sea. As he steps toward her smiling, she steps back uphill, pushing his hands away without quite letting go, a smile breaking like a wave across her censure. Mirrored in words, a pantomime, they will walk her step by step, uphill, backwards, so slowly the curving 6-meter path around the fountain. It will take 5 minutes before they disappear into the horizon of, what was I saying? The old ladies on a bench outside Soviet-era towers on the outskirts of Moscow hide memories in sounds strange as acorns, but they might just be praising Putin or calling all the young women whores. We forget or never knew there were 300,000 Axis soldiers on the small island of Sicily in the summer of 1943. Only in Italian and Spanish does the word for winter so closely resemble the word for hell. And only in English does the sound used to raise a neighbor's barn also raise a city to the ground. In Poland, the worst of the war was Nagorze Wodnie and could have been anywhere. I walked through Warsaw, Warszawa, its old town rebuilt from 18th century paintings of Bellotto after the Germans turned every block of uprising to rubble, to where the trains parked at the edge of the walled ghetto. In the 10th century, when the exiled Jews first entered the fertile valleys of the Vistula, they kept hearing the word Poland on everyone's lips, which in their own language meant rest here, and there they would. So I published that poem in the Massachusetts Review under my full name, which I'd never used before, and which created some confusions afterwards. Samuel Beckett Taylor, speaking of the Irish and St. Patrick's Day. My dad gave me that name for a special reason. And I think he always wanted me to use that as my pen name. And for reasons that might be obvious, it always felt rather heavy to me. But I decided to try it with this publication. And it did feel heavy. Sorry, Dad, I tried. But it is on the broadside. And I have one for you next time I see you. Although the name seems to win prizes, so maybe I should keep using it. I don't know. Love poems haven't really been in fashion for a while, like maybe a century or two, at least in the English-speaking world. But I like a good love poem, and I wish that we had more of them in contemporary English poetry. So I thought I'd try and write one or two, and here's just one. She asked me to describe her color, and I am wordless. It is that it is, my eyes say, looking up as if at a burning bush. Chestnut, cacao, Arabica. You are the color of that which has been ripened by fire. Earth, I say, for indeed it has been ripened. Though I look around me and there is nothing on this earth your color. Neither the green of the spring meadow, nor the violet, red, yellow, or blue geometries painted by its wildflowers, ephemeral profligacies. And now in late summer, everything is a brown thirst, but it is still not your color. What is greener than green? A brown without thirst. You are the color of a river filled with the earth that has risen and gone walking, silt and clay and mineral silence, and ripened further, glazed in the kiln of the sun. What is greener than green? A brown that gives birth. The river risen with two legs to run to the sea. Ripened but never burnt, storing within a well of sepia ink, waiting to write the story of this planet. Only when the bread is baked enough, only when the mahogany of the piano has ached enough beneath rheumatic fingers and wakened enough alone in the shuttered house, and then found again the warmth of hands and ears and starlight on the tongues of running children. You are the color behind the eyes of summer. Of this I am certain. But whether you are also the feast of the day translated into the language of the night, or the rapture beside the midnight candle translated into the broad road of the afternoon, I cannot say. I know that you make every color brighter, emerald, glacier, rose. You are the roots of color, the swoon of color. The world asks you to wear it like an Afghan. You know better than I the dictionary of color and skin, coffee, chocolate, mocha, latte. Your color may be a precise blend of espresso and milk, a recipe dashed with cinnamon or cayenne that changes between solstice and equinox like a sundial. But why would I match you like a paint swatch when you could be the bazaar that bustles with every roast of coffee, chocolate, and powdered bark, brimming boxes of spices, bulk olives, straps of leather bags, every cut of boot, the burnished lamb and roasted dove, peak flavor on the cusp of moist and crisp, guitars and ouds that lie down together in a blanket of laughter. Earth, I say, you are the color one would wish to wrap himself in to gaze upon a violet sky. Your color, like all things, is wordless. I give it these words only to help erase the centuries of lies, so that you may stand more naked in the wordless sun of my kisses, and in the mirror shards of 1,000 eyes, walk naked in the moonlight of your solitude. I like that poem, so I'm gonna drink. But if you don't like it, you can drink too. A lot has happened this year, in case you didn't know. I don't usually write about things as they are happening, but I was moved to write this piece, which is also about what has been happening a long time. I've never read it before. I wasn't even sure exactly what it was, but some people convinced me it was a poem. And maybe I'm just saying the obvious, but sometimes the obvious needs to be said. It's called The Program of America. And when Trayvon was killed, I was busy doing something in a series of rooms, proud maybe even to almost never watch the news. And I thought, well, we can't exactly know what happened. And when Michael Brown was killed, I thought again, we weren't there to see, and the witnesses who were all disagreed, and even Obama's DOJ said we lacked the evidence we need. And Michael did look a little mean on that cam, pushing the store clerk. If only we had a recording of his death, a shot of the shooting. Otherwise, how can we know he didn't do the things his killer said he did? And I continued walking through a series of rooms, porches and rooms, rooms and mirrors. But when Tamir Rice was murdered, I saw it. I was there. The instant the cop arrived, a witness to the crime, murder faster than the speed of thought. I couldn't believe that it was real. It looked like a video game, so glitchy, spastic. I thought the gears that grind this world's flame had flickered out and sputtered up some jumbled animated fiction. Or it looked like a low-res cam that only played fast forward. How could he be dead that fast? How could the cop start shooting before he cleared the door? As if he were thousands of miles away at war and knew with certainty the enemy. And how could the jury, like a judge, say, I'll allow it? And when Eric Garner was murdered, I was there. When Sandra Bland was murdered, I had just stepped out of the room. And when Philando Castile was murdered, I was in the car with his wife and child. I could not separate the scream inside me from her scream. Tell me they didn't kill me. Tell me they didn't kill him, she screamed with my voice. And then the jury took a break for lunch, ordered hoagies, and said, we'll allow it. Or they were in Orlando and ordered falafels. Or they were in Philly and ordered cheesesteaks. Or in Minneapolis and they ordered walleye. And when Ahmaud Arbery was jogging, I was there. When the cameras were turned on everywhere in America, we watched the program of America, a program produced for centuries, now with millions of episodes, the program called White Supremacy. But still the jury said, I'll allow it, I'll allow it. And since we weren't in the streets, our bodies all said, I'll allow it too. But when George Floyd was murdered, we all were there. And it wasn't just that we were there, but we were there so long. In the time of George Floyd's murder, we could have watched 300 Tamir Rices die. Philando Castile could have been murdered and brought back to life by a Black Jesus, and then murdered again by the same white cop, or by a different white cop. We could have been watching for 400 years, the kneeling officer so calm, so pleasantly content to crush 1 million lives slowly in his hand as to crush one. This was more than the work of one man. This was the work of nations, of the nation whose uniform he wore. This was more than an episode. This was a recap. If you missed the last 1 million episodes, if you missed what was happening the first 10 seconds, look again, it's still happening. If you missed what was happening the first minute or the first 3, it is still happening right there in your hand, the breath of life slowly leaving the squashed head. If you missed it the first 300 years, Look again, it is still happening. The white man's knee is still on the black man's neck. If you thought it was an old show long ago canceled, here it is still happening in your lap. And who can look at this and say, we'll allow it? Who can watch the program of America and say, I'll allow it? Who can say, I will let my children watch this program? Who can let this program run another 400 years or another day? And there we all were, not George Floyd's child or brother, mother or wife. We were all the bystanders. We were all the witnesses, plainly seeing the event, plainly stunned that it was happening, that it is still happening in broad daylight on the side of a street with traffic and pedestrians, with a coffee shop, a deli, a gas station, a modern furniture store. Looking into the camera, it is happening. In the uniform of America's hero, it is happening. In the uniform of Andy Griffith, looking into the face of everyone on earth with a smile, it is happening. Stamps, keys, phones and accessories, bus cards, organic milk, t-shirts, Mexican foods, Middle Eastern food, cheese, olives, fresh produce, Western Union. There is no part of this story that is my story. There is no part of this story that is not my story. This is the story of America. This is the story of the nation in which we live. This is the story until we say we will not accept this story. Until we say we will not accept this story, it is our story. Until we say that this has always been our story, it will always be our story. I am not George Floyd, but I am George Floyd. I am not Tamir Rice, but I am Tamir Rice. How could I be anyone but Tamir Rice? Anyone but the Tamir Rice who was not born as Tamir Rice. I don't know anyone who is Philando Castile, but I don't know anyone who is not Philando Castile. If you do not think you are Eric Gardner, you are certainly not whoever you think you are. If you are not the child of Fred Hampton and the mother of Sandra Bland, you are not anyone's child, and you will never have a child. And you shall always be a barren orphan in this world. If you are not the wife of Philando Castile, you will never know even the crumbs of love. If you are not Ahmaud Arbery, you shall never run again with joy in your breast. If you are not Eric Gardner, your breath shall give you no life. And if you're not Breonna Taylor, there will be no shelter for you, neither in this world nor the hereafter. I am white. I am white in America. I know I am white now because I never saw this program in my own body in 40 years until it started playing online. I know I am white because no one in my family had ever seen this program. We learned it as history, as a program canceled decades ago. And when the first new episodes aired, I thought they were specials. I didn't know it was a regular program, a daily program, that it was programmatic, that it was programmed so I wouldn't see, and that I was programmed not to believe the program if I should ever somehow, through a glitch in the program, happen to see it. Okay, I'm now going to conclude with two poems from my second book, Nude, Descending in Empire. I think probably half the people out there are people who know me and may already know these poems. And if you want to tune out now, bye. Thanks for coming. but since half the people out there have probably never heard of me before, I thought I'd read a couple poems from my last book. I also want to mention, though, as Ellen said, that I have a new book coming out in the fall called The Book of Fools, in essay and memoir and verse. And it's probably not like any book you've ever read exactly. And I'm excited about it, but it's a book length project and it's not easy to excerpt or just read a couple poems. So I'll wait to read from it in the fall when it comes out. This next poem continues with the theme of America. In a way, I feel like it's a barometer of how much has changed in the past dozen years or so, how much more information people have now, and also how much more poetry is allowed to be, or even expected to be, political. I think I wrote this poem around 2008. And when I read it, I found it really shocked people. So much so that I found myself saying things like, I love the ideals of my country, or something like that, before I read it, just to cushion the shock. I'm not sure it shocks people anymore. And now, if anything, maybe it's passé. Maybe this will be the last time I ever read it. But I was reminded of our karma by some recent events. America in Autobiography. When America overthrew the democratic government of Iran, my mother was a question mark curled upside down in my grandmother's belly. When America overthrew the democratic government of Guatemala, my father was listening to a radio broadcast of Willie Mays and the New York Giants. When America gave Castro a poisoned milkshake, tried to explode his beard with a cigar, my dad was watching his father slowly dying on the porch, empty his piss pot over the railing toward the Sandlot home plate. When America killed the democratic leader of Chile, my father was a waiter in an Italian restaurant in Coral Gables, bringing water to a table where a stranger sat with a group of friends. My mother blew the wrapper off the straw, and my father thought her immature. When America exploded the democratic leader of Ecuador, I was learning how to draw palm trees in my front yard. Between the gardenia and the red brick stoop, a duck had laid a nest of eggs. When America crashed the plane of the leader of Panama, my mom told me it was beautiful, my drawing. Whatever I drew, my mother told me it was beautiful. In the year my mother died, America finally overthrew the democratic government of America. When my father dies, I already have plans to bury him beside my mother against both of their wishes. And then I, America, wild with grief, am going to overthrow the democratic government of Greenland with my army of one and wait for the ice to melt. Well, finally tonight, I'll close with a poem that has always been a crowd pleaser, but I really don't know what it will be like to read it when there is no crowd. It also returns, actually I'm gonna have some more wine first. It also returns in a way to where we started tonight with Postcards from Babel, with translations and misunderstandings between languages, but in a very different tone, we might say. The Book of Poetry. A friend in Thailand, helping to build straw bale homes, was riding with 4 Buddhist monks on the back of a truck piled high with musky bales. "I love water buffaloes," she burst out in broken Thai. The monks laughed. "I guess that is a strange thing to say," she thought, but insisted. "No, really, I really love them." Trying to unfurl herself clearly, practicing the Zen garden of making conversation with only a few words. "They are so beautiful, so strong. Don't you love them?" But the monks just kept laughing. Every traveler in Southeast Asia has her own story of tonal confusion. The same syllable spoken different ways becomes 4, 6, 7 words. In China, ma means mother, but also hemp, horse, scold. Depending if it is flat, ma, rising, ma, dipping, ma, or falling, ma. Sometimes context helps, as when ordering food. No one is likely to confuse "I want to eat" with "I demand an ugly woman," unless one were dining in a brothel, and even then, "I want eggplant," though mistoned as whirlpool, shake, concubine, twins, would likely produce only strips of sauce-smeared nightshade. Everyone in China wants to know what you do. It's not easy, even in English, for a poet to say that. When they asked, I said first, "I write," "washir," or sometimes after I had learned the word, "I am a poet," "wa-shir-shir-ren." Often I was met by puzzlement, strained foreheads, awkward laughter, Chinese people glancing at each other for cues, uncertain how to react. Not so different, really, from the response in America. "A poet," I'd repeat, "wa-shir-shir-ren." Then, "I write poetry," trying to make the most of my minuscule vocabulary. "I write books of poetry." Wa-shir-shir-ren, literally, I am a poetry person. Wa means I, Ren means person or man. Near the end of my travels, someone told me "sure," which means poetry in the high flat tone, as well as the verb to be in the falling tone, also means shit in yet another tone. So all along, I must have been saying, "I am a shit man. I write shit," and repeating it. "A shit person. I write books of shit. Understand?" To be, poetry, shit. Something fitting in how these words were assigned the same syllable, the same address. Later, looking the word up, I discovered for each tone, sure was 10 or 20 words, a whole apartment complex sharing one mailbox. Corpse, loss, world, history, time, stone, life, to begin, to be, to die, to fail, to be addicted to, rough silk, persimmons, raincoats, swine, long-tailed marmot, clear water, all crowded into the same syllable. Sure, sure, sure. It was also coincidentally the word for yes. So perhaps I had said something else entirely. I thought of all the combinations I might have said. I am a shit person. I write life. I am a death person. I write being. I shit history, man. I history, being person. I write time. I write books of failure, books of corpses, books of loss, books of yes. I am a being person. I write to be. I am addicted to being a man. I write books of shit, books of clear water. I am a poet. It seemed all the world could, even should, have one word for everything. Table scales, taxis, bicycles, stones, cities, time and history and death and life. It was all shit. It was all poetry. As for my friend, she found out later water buffalo was a variation of the word for penis. So I love penises, she had confided to the Buddhist monks, the truck jostling, the potholes throwing her knees against theirs. I really love penises, she had insisted, looking into their celibate eyes. Penises are so beautiful, so strong. Don't you love them? Since the syllable for monk is also the syllable of my name on fire in a world of loss, I will answer, sure, I love penises and water buffalo and the smell of wet hay and vaginas and sauteed eggplant. And I want to tell the Buddhist monks and the Chinese bureaucrats and the official from Homeland Security who stopped me in customs to search my computer, and my mother, the Szechuan horse, I am a shit man writing books of stone, and the clear water has failed, but I am addicted, writing yes in a city of corpses and swine and persimmon, here at the end of history, now at the beginning of time. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And thank you again thank you again to everyone at the Massachusetts Review.
Well, and we thank you, Sam. Samuel Beckett Taylor. I think we can certainly say that you have pleased the crowd. In fact, I think we'll have to record also the chat here and send that to you as evidence, because right now I'm pretty sure that people are applauding all across this country and others. Yeah. So thanks again for coming. That's it, folks, for this evening's reading. Before you leave, though, two more important announcements. First, if I can manage to do this, let me see. I'm going to try sharing my screen. Yeah, there it is. You can purchase that broadside of Sam's prize-winning poem by visiting our website, and it's really beautiful. It's signed and numbered, and our art director Pam Glavin does an amazing job with these. So, and last announcement, I also want to invite you to the reading of our 2021 Halley Prize winner, Abigail Chebetnoy, whose poem "Girls Are Coming Out of the Water," and that will be on May 3rd this year. Her poem appeared in our special issue last December, A Gathering of Native Voices. So thanks again, and we hope to see you all soon in person in a post-COVID world. Good night, and thanks.